Tonight, questions about Scotland's school assessments. How fair are they?
Exams are off this year, but some pupils and teachers fear class assessments are actually exams by another name.
A special report on flats being let out for residential use under the guise of holiday lets by a man refused entry to the Scottish Landlord Register.
Also tonight, the writing on the wall, allegations that women are being intimidated by this anti-abortion campaign in Edinburgh.
Now, flats owned by a man who was refused entry to Scotland's Landlord Register have been let out for residential use under the guise of holiday lets. Mark Fortune failed to get on the list of fit and proper landlords in 2013 after threatening his tenants. But BBC Scotland, working alongside investigative journalists from The Ferret, has found that rooms in his Edinburgh flats have been let out under contracts that don't offer tenants full protection. Andrew Pickett reports.
Titus moved to Edinburgh in September last year. He found a room in a flat share online advertised under the name George.
He was only listed as £415 a month. It's a beautiful location right on the meadows. It's a pandemic, there's not a lot of money to go around. From our first viewing, it seemed like it was in good condition. The walls have been freshly painted, and he just said it's first come, first serve. So there's one room left. If you want it, you have to take it now, and you have to put down a £300 deposit. We might have only been in there for 5 minutes. We didn't even actually see the bathroom, it was so quick.
It's the window in the kitchen.
After moving in, Titus began to notice problems.
Right off the bat, the wood underneath the fridge in the kitchen is rotted, like you could stick your finger through it. The wood around the sink in the kitchen is rotted, there's mold. When it rains, there's a hole in the bathroom ceiling that water comes through, like brown sludgy water, bird poo on all sorts of, on the wall. It's gotten to the point where there's so many things that it's hard to remember them all at once.
And then he rolled down the blinds and discovered this.
As you can see, the previous tenants had some sort of bone to pick with the landlord.
This is the man who owns Titus's flat, Mark Fortune. He's a millionaire businessman now based in Monaco and has fought to own dozens of flats across the city. Controversy has followed him for years. In 2013, Mark Fortune was refused entry to the Landlord Register after being found guilty of a number of offences relating to his letting business, including threatening tenants. Edinburgh City Council say he reapplied to join the register in 2018, and this too was refused. Scotland's private rent sector is huge, and it's becoming harder than ever to find affordable housing in the nation's capital. The cost of a room in a flat share in Edinburgh has jumped by more than 40% in the last decade. Hayley Lusar and Gergai Farkas moved into a room in a flat share in Edinburgh in October last year.
Once we had moved in, we had realised the extent of the mould and the water damage. There was huge cracks in the ceiling. There's a lot of electrical damage.
The toilet was not working.
Toilet was never working.
Yeah. And it's missing some vital stuff like smoke detectors.
They asked our landlord to fix a broken skylight and electrical problems. They got a reply saying that their contract would not be renewed and they would have to leave their home.
It's like your heart sinks. What are you supposed to do? It's like you don't expect that. You ask for a simple fix and they say get out.
When they moved in, they signed this contract. It's with Edinburgh Rent Limited, a company owned by Mark Fortune. The contract is not a tenancy agreement, but is in fact a holiday let contract, stating that they were there for just 1 month and the flat was not their main residence. It's the same contract Titus was given. You weren't on holiday, you were here to work.
We're here to live, yeah, we have pre-settled status. So we're in Scotland for a while.
The couple shared their story online. Then they received threats of legal action from the company.
They said you need to stop saying bad things about us. None of it's true. We're always good to our tenants. We always fix things. I don't know what your problem is. You need to delete your posts or we're going to get our solicitors to look at this for defamation.
Hayley and Gergai were told that they were not being kicked out, but that the agreed holiday let contract was coming to an end. We showed their contract to property lawyer Catherine Macquarie.
Essentially, you can't have a holiday let if you're not on holiday. It's as simple as that. That simply means that the agreement is null and void, and indeed, instead, the parties have a private residential tenancy agreement.
Catherine believes that even as a holiday let agreement, The contract is full of errors.
It is quite clear the legislation contained within it is incorrect, and it's also quite clear from the wording of the document that the person using this is attempting to get out of complying with the legislation that would otherwise apply to the tenant. This certainly doesn't look like any valid holiday let agreement that I've ever seen in the past.
So what advantage is there for the landlord from this agreement?
The landlord believes he is obviously getting away with not having to comply with landlord registration, complying with repairing standards, and also that he believes that he then has the ability to simply evict the tenant without a court order.
Basically, Alessandro Carossi is part of Mark Fortune Investigation, a campaign group set up to raise awareness about concerns in Fortune-owned properties. The group surveyed former tenants and say that many people complain about poor conditions.
The problem is always the same. It's flat conditions that are very poor, in some cases dangerous. For example, my flat, we had water leaking from a shower, and the water was leaking through the 2 floors, reaching all the electric wires that obviously can cause a fire.
Alessandro says when he moved out, the landlord refused to return his deposit. This was also a reoccurring theme in the group's survey.
All the people that they reached us, Mark Fortune Investigation groups, no one got their deposit back. That I know. The majority are all foreigners like me. A lot of them, they just moved to Edinburgh. They cannot afford a better flat or more expensive flats, earning the minimum wages.
In the last month, the BBC has found flats owned by Fortune advertised for long-term let online. Mr. Fortune told BBC Scotland he does not operate as a landlord. His properties are operated by limited companies having been granted licence, which allows commercial subletting. He added that all deposits that were due for refund have been refunded, and the complaints represent a very small percentage of overall residents across the 160 properties he says he owns. Andrew Picken, BBC News.
Well, let's speak now to Seamus Johnson-McLeod in Edinburgh. He's a member of Living Rent, a group which campaigns for tenants in Scotland. Seamus, thanks so much for your time this evening. I just want to start by asking you, how do people find themselves in these situations? Is it the case that it's just people that are, absolutely desperate for somewhere to stay?
Yeah, as we heard earlier in the reporting, this is occurring within the wider context of a housing system in crisis. So short-term and holiday lets have greatly reduced the city's housing stock. And whilst many of these properties have returned to the private residential sector due to COVID impacts on travel, if action isn't taken, they will return to sites like Airbnb as soon as it becomes profitable again. The holiday let sector is, for all intents and purposes, unregulated, and it's within this low scrutiny environment that Mark Fortune's able to operate. Further, because rents have been allowed to rise far beyond the pace of wage increases, people are forced to consider living in dilapidated and unsafe properties. We're asked why tenants choose to live in these conditions, and the sad answer is that for many, they're the only affordable option. Sure. And often the conditions in reputably let properties aren't much better than those you've seen.
So when tenants do find themselves in this situation, we heard a little bit in the report there that some people were feeling, intimidated. What advice do you have for people who do find themselves in a situation like that?
The first thing that tenants should do, and this applies to former tenants as well, is get in touch with us at Living Rent, which can be done either directly or via the Mark Fortune Investigation Group. We're strongly committed to helping our members and tenants across Scotland identify, access and protect their rights. In cases where they are being threatened with eviction or receiving other unwanted or intimidating communications, they should also report this to the police. That is the police's purview and responsibility. But unfortunately, in doing so, they may also have to explain to the police the legal situation that they're in, which we can assist with as well.
Okay. Seamus, thanks so much for your time this evening. I suppose for people that maybe are looking for a flat, one thing to do would be to check the landlord registry, wouldn't it? We really appreciate your time this evening. Thanks.
Thank you.